Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Egan Community Television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Egan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. And with us today is Laurie Halverson, hopefully the new voice for Egan, running for the legislature in District 51B. Laurie's been with us once before. Her opponent has been invited to appear on numerous occasions and has not had the courtesy to reply even. So, Laurie, you've got the floor to yourself. We know that you're a community activist. You're certainly, you tell us some of the activities you've had.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back, Alan. I love the community of Egan that I'm running to represent and have been involved in our community for a very long time. I currently chair the Egan Park and Rec Commission. This is my third year as chair. I've served on the commission for 8 years, and it's been a fantastic experience because we really get to be the conduit from the citizens to the city government and let the city government know what Egan is looking for in terms of its park amenities and recreation programming.
And one of the things they were looking for is a new dog park, and it's done.
It's done.
And it's a great dog park.
It's a fantastic dog park, and it's such a testament to the way the system can really work for the citizens. And we heard as commission members that this is something that Eganites were looking for, and we did our homework and talked to the animal control officers, talked to the parks director and the city council, and as soon as we made a decision in March to move forward with the project, it was immediately underway and it was completed in mid-July, and it is gaining popularity every single day.
It certainly is.
Yeah, it's located up at Thresher Fields at the soccer field, near the soccer field. So if you have a dog, come on out and play.
Well, Dakota has only missed one day, and that was because of really heavy rain. So you know that from meeting Sharon there on occasion. But,
yes, I get to run into Sharon and Dakota quite often.
And some of the other activities.
I serve as a director for the Egan Foundation board. That's a nonprofit group here in Egan that raises money for scholarships for Egan students. So high school students who are looking to go on to technical training or to college can access funds through the Egan Foundation. And that organization has been around for more than 20 years. And we have just distributed nearly $1 million to Egan students.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, it's quite an accomplishment.
Awesome
yep,
money.
And it's completely grassroots. And it's fantastic. We also work to support, financially support local nonprofit organizations that are serving our community, as well as providing support as a fiscal agent to new nonprofits or for temporary projects. For example, there was a group that wanted to put together some funds for post-Katrina relief in New Orleans, and we served as the fiscal agent for that, that among other projects.
So you're really well grounded in Egan civic activities and charitable activities, and you decided that this was a year to try to turn things around in the legislature, and you're taking on a one-term legislator, young Doug Wardlow, who I have dubbed the crybaby legislator for reasons that we'll discuss later perhaps. But one of the things that he says in his literature is that he is going to grow jobs reduce spending, protect liberty, and improve education. Now, what's your take on how he's performed so far in that regard?
Well, as a first-term legislator, he definitely has a record that we can hold up against those particular claims, and I take exception to a number of the accomplishments that he is promoting, because the fact is our schools are really hurting because of the action and inaction at the legislature in the last legislative session. We saw a legislature that was willing to shut down our government for 21 days rather than compromise and get a budget passed for the people of Minnesota.
And he was voted for that.
He ultimately yeah, he was part of the shutdown, no compromise. He was quoted as saying the time for compromise was over during that very, very trying time in the history of our legislature.
Which cost the state tens of millions of dollars.
Yep, and it cost workers in Minnesota millions of dollars. It was really a hardship for Minnesota families to see that government shut down, and we can't have that happen again. We need a legislature that's willing to work together and with a commitment to getting the job done. We're going to be facing another multi-billion-dollar deficit when the legislature reconvenes in January, and we're going to need legislators there who are going to be committed to getting the work done.
But that can't be, because he says, I helped turn a deficit into a surplus.
That's unfortunately,
right
that's
his
false.
Literature piece.
Unfortunately, that's false. It is a little bit of tricky math that they're doing to make that claim, and that is not what the legislature is going to be facing when they go back into session. Hopefully, I'll get to be there in January, and we need legislators who are going to be committed to making sure that we do the work to pass a responsible budget, a budget that doesn't balance itself on the backs of the middle-class families and the backs of our school children. The fact is the budget compromise that ended up happening really was hard on Minnesota's middle class.
Well, am I mistaken? They took money that was destined for education, which is under our Constitution a requirement, and they put it into the general fund and said to the schools, we'll pay you sometime down the road. You're on your own.
Yep.
Raise money.
And that was $2.4 billion that they borrowed from the schools to make that happen, and it's the third...
A billion with a B.
B, yes. And it's the third time that they've used that as a budget balancing gimmick, and our schools can't afford it. Egan schools are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest on loans that they've had to take out in order to pay their bills, because the fact is our schools have responsibilities and they have to, they've got bills to pay. And when the legislature takes the money that they are owed and redirects it, it has a direct and immediate impact on our kids. And so we need to stop using gimmicks to balance our budget.
Wardlow also says he's going to protect liberty.
Yes, well.
What exactly liberties is he protecting? Is he protecting women's rights?
He has a record of advocating against the rights of women, and it's well spelled out. He has co-sponsored a number of pieces of legislation that would end up hurting women's ability to make their own decisions about health care and to access comprehensive health care for women. So that's extremely concerning.
That would seem to be taking away liberties from people.
He also voted to promote the voter ID amendment, which has will, if it passes, restrict people's liberties at the voting booth. It will restrict access for certain people at the voting booth, and that is knowing that voting is the one subject that is the most dealt with in our Constitution. To me, that's a real attack on liberty.
And of course, when it comes to voter fraud, statistics show that 0.00003, I can't even go down that low, cases of voter fraud, legitimate voter fraud in the country. And voter fraud is virtually unknown in Minnesota. But the purpose of the amendment, and of course, when they passed it as a bill, the governor rightfully vetoed it. The purpose of the amendment is to keep people from the polls, just as you said.
And it will have that action.
Armed forces, students.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as a student, when I was in college, I was so excited at 18 to get to go and cast my first vote in a presidential election. And I went down there and with my ID that wasn't for these purposes valid because it had my home address on it, my parents' address on it, and I was living in Mankato, Minnesota, and I presented that at the ballot with my student bill, which proved that I was residing in the community where I was voting and was able to vote, and voted in every election since, and am so happy to have had that opportunity. And the thought that that could be taken away from a single person, it should frighten us. And the fact is, as you said, it's almost non-existent. And the type of voter fraud that this particular amendment is supposed to be working against is, as you said, not proven to even exist in Minnesota, and that's voter impersonation. We've got a fantastic voter system in Minnesota.
I don't think we've ever had a case of voter impersonation as far as I know.
They haven't found one yet. And so they can continue to keep looking, but the fact is it's a problem in search of a solution.
Of course, we have Doug Wardlow, who's been impersonating a legislator for 2 years, but that's a whole different ballgame, and maybe that will change. Doug says that he is a leader of a broad effort to stop Obamacare, and of course it's the Affordable Care Act, and promote health care freedom. Now, how's he going to do that?
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Wardlow has chosen to author legislation that would keep Minnesota from being allowed to create its own healthcare exchange. And this is a state where we have come closer than any state in the union to having universal coverage because of programs like Minnesota Care that was created through a bipartisan group of legislators and has served our state well. And because of our high risk pool and because of other foresight that Minnesota has seen to ensure that Minnesotans have access to affordable health care. And the fact is if Minnesota can't be allowed to lead the country, we're going to put ourselves at great risk of having a generic program just put into Minnesota by the federal government. And the fact is I know that Minnesota can do better, and we can show the other states how to get this done.
And it's interesting because some of the other states are jumping on the bandwagon of trying to implement what is in the Affordable Care Act. Even those states that have Republican governors, because they see how setting up the exchange is going to be helpful to them financially and to the people of the state.
Absolutely, and we've seen that borne out in Minnesota with the policies that we've put in place to create this public-private partnership that exists in Minnesota healthcare. We're the only state that has a nonprofit healthcare system, and so our healthcare dollars actually go to healthcare in Minnesota. It's not going to pay stockholders, and a lot of folks don't understand that, and we're going to put our system at risk if we don't take leadership on this. And the fact is that the governor did convene a task force of folks to study the exchange and make recommendations for what our state exchange should look like. The Republicans in the majority in the legislature chose not to participate in that particular task force. And so it's another example of folks being against something and not offering to bring something else to the table. And I think that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, and we need to have a better dialogue.
And of course, in throwing out the Affordable Care Act, for instance, children will no longer be able to be carried on their parents' insurance until they're 26. Is that a fair statement?
In Minnesota, we're actually in a little different boat. In Minnesota, we actually passed that particular provision as part of state health care reform in 2008. And so Minnesota was ahead of the ballgame in allowing folks to stay on their parents' health care insurance until the age of 26, which really helps create a safety net for folks who are at great risk of being uninsured, and that's folks from 18 to 26, because it's hard to find and keep a job after college. So that's a case where the
Obama plan really modeled itself after us.
Yes, absolutely.
What about denying coverage to people for pre-existing illnesses?
Right, and in 2014 we're going to see a system where insurance companies will not be able to deny coverage to people in the private insurance market because of pre-existing conditions. That's extremely important, an important provision, because the fact is if you're in a group plan, you're pretty much safe and you're covered. But if you lose your job, if something happens, or if you want to be an entrepreneur and go out on your own and buy insurance through the private market, as you know, when you hang out your own shingle, if you have a pre-existing healthcare condition, you can be denied coverage in the private market. Currently, kids can't be.
Wardlow's not troubled by your being denied.
And I'm very troubled by it. And the fact is in 2014, everybody in the country is going to be able to be covered. And when people are covered, we're all safer in terms of it helps keep costs down. We are able to, and that's in the private market and in the public market. It keeps costs down because uncompensated care gets picked up by the private pay market, and so when you or I go to the hospital, rates get set because of to cover uncompensated care as well as the care that we're getting. So.
He's also in favor of the plan, as I understand it, that would give people a voucher. And an interesting example: I have a friend who went in for knee replacement surgery 7 weeks ago. Something went wrong. Now, if he had a $6,000 voucher, he could have applied that toward his surgery. He will on Tuesday have his 11th operation. He was in ICU. They weren't sure whether he was going to live. They thought they were going to have to amputate the leg below the knee. He's been in Abbott Northwestern all this time. His medical bills, plus I think all these operations, 10 or 11, have mounted up over $1 million. Where would a family like that be with a $6,000 voucher?
Well, they certainly wouldn't be able to get the kind of care that they need. Where the voucher system, or any kind of voucher system in healthcare, really ignores the fact that healthcare is not a regular marketplace. We don't buy healthcare like we buy gum at the store. We, as consumers, for the most part, aren't the direct payers of our healthcare. It's paid through a third party. It might be the government. It might be a private health insurance plan. And in addition, you've got folks who are supposedly shopping for healthcare who are in crisis. These are folks who, like your friend, are experiencing a significant disruption in their lives, and they're not in a situation where they're going to be doing a lot of comparison shopping. They might be in an emergency situation. And it really ignores the realities of the healthcare marketplace. And what we found in Minnesota is that having this public-private partnerships that have been developed, it provides enough of a safety net for folks so that we aren't seeing tons of uncompensated care. We're not seeing situations like you described in such great detail. We're able to provide the kind of care that people need in a marketplace where people are insured, where people are covered, and so their care is not uncompensated.
Wardlow also signed the now very questionable Grover Nordquist pledge, no new taxes. Under any circumstances, no new taxes. Would you undertake, as opposed to your oath to the Constitution, which I think should predominate, would you undertake something like that?
No, pledges like that aren't good for our civic discourse. They're not good for our debate. The fact is the no new taxes pledge in itself is really a misnomer, because in our last legislative session, middle-class families saw their taxes go up because the legislature pulled back the homestead tax credit. They cut the homestead tax credit for middle-class families. And so families who were getting a credit on their income tax saw that go away. That's a direct tax increase on folks. And that was part of the Republican majority's budget plan. And so the fact that they're saying that they balanced a budget without raising taxes is false. And it's hitting middle-class families.
Now, another one of the things he says is that he's got the skill set that lends itself to serving as a legislator. I've had two legislators tell me a story of something that apparently took place in the Republican caucus, where he was just with his own Republican members. He was trying to put something forward. They wouldn't. It was so radical that they wouldn't consider it. He tried and was blocked, and as a result ran out of the caucus. I was told in tears, I didn't see it, I don't know, locked himself in the men's room and wouldn't come out. And they had to call Egan and have his father, former legislator Lynn Wardlow, come down and talk him out of the men's room an hour later. I don't know if you've heard that story, but if there's any substance to that story at all, and I said I've heard it from two very responsible legislators, that certainly doesn't lend itself to serving as a legislator. That would be the crybaby legislator. And I don't think we need crybabies in the legislature.
Yeah. Well, I have a very strong feeling that service is incredibly important to our community. And service is about listening to the constituents and listening to the community, and creating paths for discussion, for compromise, for the growth of new ideas, because we as a state are facing some real significant issues. I'm talking to people at the door who are dealing for the first time in their life with job loss, or dealing with the fact that their child, who got a first-class education in Egan schools and a first-class education at the University of Minnesota, is facing a job market where they can't get employed, and they have tremendous concerns about this. Families are facing big issues, and we need to create a system or be dedicated to this system that listens to the constituents. And just being against something, or just putting your foot down and saying my way or the highway, is not good service for our community, and it's not the way to lead at the legislature. Being a representative means that you represent the people. And so listening to your constituents and being part of the solution and getting the job done needs to be the priority.
We know that he is anti-union, and would back right to work if we had it. Thinks that pensions are overblown for teachers, although I don't know any teachers who are retiring on such a big pension that they fall amongst the people like Grover Norquist, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and really never had to really scrimp and save to get their family ahead, to send them to college, to get them out there. Those things don't just jibe with me for somebody who says that he knows and has the skill sets of a legislator. So I know we talked briefly about the amendments, and you indicated that you oppose both of the amendments that are coming up on the Constitution. He also, Wardlow, brags that he co-authored tort reform legislation. Now, as somebody who used to practice law, tort reform legislation really punishes the people who can't afford lawyers. Less than 1% of costs from litigation are from big verdicts. More than 50% result in defendants' verdicts. What this would do, in my mind, is stifle people from having access to the courts, which Republicans have tried to do in several ways. I don't know beyond tort reform where he stands on that, but where do you sit on, putting these caps on tort reform and things like that?
Well, the legislation that was authored and was ultimately vetoed in the last legislative session on tort reform really was an attack on an individual's right to get just compensation if they are harmed. And it would have limited the statute of limitations when they could file such a claim. And you can't limit people's ability to access our court system, as you said. We need to have justice, and the individual needs to have the courts available to them to seek such justice when they're available. And you can't, like you said, it can't be available only to those with means, because our court systems are an incredibly important part of our legal system and our system for seeking justice within the system. And folks need to have that available to them.
And we're lucky that we have Governor Dayton, who was the watchdog against this legislature. First time in 40 years that we have suffered with two Republican houses, and they got nothing done. other than these 2 amendments, they got nothing done. Even the governor's bonding bill, they slashed by 1/3, which would have created jobs, put people back to work, and worked on the infrastructure. So, I mean, there's something that doesn't ring right there. You are a wife, you are a mother, you are an activist in the community. Have you been out every day knocking on doors? And
every day.
Tell us
Sundays
what
with
you're
my
doing.
4-year-old son. And it's a complete joy to be out talking to the Egan voters. As I mentioned, it's amazing to hear what people have to say at the doors and the concerns that people are dealing with every day, and the recognition that they need somebody in St. Paul who can be an advocate for our community is incredibly important. And right now what we're facing, and you talked about the kind of quagmire that we've seen at the legislature in the last session, the fact is we're being led by the extreme, and that's not what needs to happen in Minnesota. That's not what needs to happen for Egan. Extremism doesn't have a place, particularly when you look at a legislature who has such a thin majority, and they don't have a mandate to lead with, you know, an exclusive agenda. Their job is to listen to the people. And so getting out and going door to door has been tremendously eye-opening and rewarding, and I can't wait to get to work for the people of Egan.
so maybe what this session needs in Egan, which has been chosen as the 15th best city to live in the country, instead of a mandate, is a woman date. And maybe that woman is Laurie Halverson, who is running for the legislature in District 51B. And you have a few seconds for any parting thoughts to your constituents.
Absolutely. Well, I first just want to thank you for having me back. I want to thank the people of Egan for creating such a dynamic place to live and work and raise a family. We are incredibly lucky to live in this community, and I am dedicated to the community of Egan. I'm dedicated to making sure that we lead appropriately at the legislature, that we listen to our constituents, and that we get the job done. We need to make sure that our middle-class families can thrive. We need to make sure that our kids continue to get the very best education that they can get, so that we have a workforce that's ready to make Minnesota the great state that it is. So.
Laurie Halverson, good luck and thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, Alan.